Talk to me a little bit about the switch to HD because we're about 6 months ahead of that right here. It's not like you guys decide, okay, next Monday we're going HD. Like this is a much bigger involved process maybe than people realize. And I'm wondering, we're about 6 months out. How far in advance did you guys have to start planning for the switch to high def?
God, I want to say probably about a year.
Yeah.
So the entire industry was switching over to high definition cameras, television. You first had people selling the televisions that were high def. The problem with that was that things weren't being shot in high def yet. So you've got a high definition television, but if the cameras and the production is not high def, then you're just going to get the same picture that you got before. The industry had to change as a whole to high definition cameras, to high definition makeup, different type of makeup. They started using the airbrushes and things of that nature. Um, it just was it was an upgrade in every single thing that you did. So your monitors had to be high def, because if if you have a high definition camera but you don't have a high def monitor, then you're going to see it differently. You're not going to show all the imperfections that a high def monitor would. So you had to have all of it for it to work, and that was, that's the expense, that's the time, and then everybody, you got to make certain, every flaw shows up. I mean, you might as close as we are right now. That's how close you would have to be to see the imperfections that the camera is.
Right.
And it just brought everything out.
I'm not saying this to be funny, I promise. But at this point, TNA had ran a handful of shows in HD. Do you think that you guys took a look at what they did, not to figure out how to do it, but maybe to learn from their mistakes and see, oh, wow, from this, you can really see this exposed, or hey, we need
No.
to be sure that we don't do it that way, or whatever?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. We were looking at television. We were looking at how television was being shot in general, how the news was being shot. We were looking at everything else, because that's what, again, TNA didn't worry about their lighting or anything else. They may have shot with high definition cameras, but they didn't shoot with the attention to detail that your network news is going to have, that a primetime television show is going to have. So that's what we were looking at, because when it changed, whoo, it was different. We're so used to it today that you don't think about those things anymore. But when you first make the switch, it's like drastic, very drastic.
I want to talk to you a little bit about that switch to HD, because I know you say, oh, we're watching the news and things like that. And I get that. But I think a lot of fans have been under the impression that one of the reasons, or one of the things that has to change with HD, is we have to be careful not to, for lack of a better word, expose the magic of professional wrestling. And maybe that is when we introduce more of the quick cuts that we've seen criticized online for quite a while, maybe less now than in years prior. But from the HD onset, it did feel like there was a paradigm shift to where we need to cut away to different angles. And I'm wondering, do you think that was just a philosophical thing about we would need to create motion, or what were they really trying to protect the magic, or a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. It had nothing to do with HD.
Okay.
It's just within in looking at how you shoot matches, and it's a different philosophy, and it's a way to, if you're looking at something, you cut on punches or you cut on kicks, your chances of exposing something are greatly reduced when you do that. So that was the philosophy, and also to give a more action packed and more fight sequence that people are used to on your television shows and movies and things of that nature, that you get.
Let's talk a little bit about the other big angle that's happening here. We've got Dave Batista coming back, and Mark Henry's calling him out. When Batista shows up, he calls out Mark Henry. Mark starts down the ramp. Rey Mysterio is going to come out to try to stop him. Mark Henry puts a whooping on him. And then Batista gets his licks, and boy, he destroys Mark Henry with chair shots. Mark's bleeding here. It's a cool visual and it's a cool story because we're like 10 years into the Mark Henry run. I mean, you got to go back to like SummerSlam 96 era when you start to see him on TV as like, hey, coming soon sort of thing. And now it feels like around this time, it's really clicked with him in WWE somehow because he's moving up the cards in a big way. He's cutting good promos. His work is good. What happened in 2006 where it felt like, man, it just clicked with him in WWE in a big way?
No different than any other talent in any other sport. A lot of times it takes you a while to become established and to find that comfort. Mark broke into the business having never been around it. He was a power lifter and had always been coached and always been babied all the way throughout his entire career to get to the point where he was at that time. A lot of guys had already spent those 10 years as journeyman wrestlers going from territory to territory, learning how to work, learning what to do in certain situations. Mark didn't have that. Mark had it, here, WWE, and that was his exposure, and that's what he knew and what he grew up with. So 10 years to me is like, oh, yeah, that's about the sweet spot. Some guys get it a lot sooner, and those are the ones that we see and go, oh, holy cow, well, he did it in what seems like, 3 or 4 years, when in reality they don't take into consideration the fact that that talent already had a few years training behind them and underneath them. So, Mark was kind of coming into his own. And I think this was during the time that Mark really started feeling it and started feeling his character, started feeling comfortable in his own skin in the ring. So, it was just kind of his coming out party, if you will.
How important was Batista's return for SmackDown here? I mean, you got Kurt Angle out, you got Rob Van Dam out, you're down some stars. So just having Batista back, even if it's a different show, it's not Raw, it's not ECW, it's SmackDown. But he was like a tippy top guy on SmackDown for a while. It's got to be a big deal to have him back.
Absolutely. Anytime you get a big star back is a huge relief because as you said, when you look at the guys dropping like flies, you look at guys that leave, and most of the time when they leave, it's not a phased out leaving. It's an injury, it's a drug, something or other, and it's an immediate bye-bye. Well, you don't have time to write them out and write somebody in. It's like, they're gone. Now what? Now I've got a giant void in the roster. And how do you fill that? Well, when you have a giant void, you can either fill it with about 5 or 6 guys to hopefully make up that void, or you take one giant superstar and put them in. Ideally, you have a couple of superstars to put in. But yeah, having a major star like Batista back that helps. That helps big time when you lose an RVD, when you lose an Angle.